Hey, what's up? And welcome to Walk in the Word with Benevolent Faith Ministries, the show where we provide biblical interpretation that engages the words of the text, the context behind the text, and the application for us beyond the text. Today, we want to speak from the subject, a misaligned ministry. A misaligned ministry. And our scripture for this conversation stems out of the book of Amos. Chapter 5, verse 24. We've been here before, a couple episodes ago, but we want to come back to it. And we're looking specifically at verse 24 of chapter 5, which reads, "But let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream." Now, as we begin to discuss the concept of misalignment, let's start with some general definitions here. Misalignment means, quote, the incorrect arrangement or position of something in relation to something else, or something that is, quote, improperly or badly adjusted or aligned or out of line or position, out of position, okay? And arguably, the first thing that comes to your mind when we say misalignment is probably a car's steering system, okay, and the tires, especially if you ever got cracked financially because your alignment went off in your car. If you ever had to pay for that, you know what I'm talking about. Now, tire alignment, which is also known as wheel alignment, that refers to an adjustment of a vehicle's suspension. And the suspension is the system that connects the vehicle to the wheels. So the alignment is not an adjustment of the tires or the wheels themselves, okay? It's an adjustment of the suspension or the system. It's an adjustment of the system. Don't miss that, okay? And so proper tire alignment helps your tires perform properly and helps them last longer and improves your car's handling. So when your car is not aligned properly or misaligned, then the driving performance of your car suffers. Like I said, it costs you a lot of money. Now, properly aligned tires rotate in a straight line, like that. And that results in the steering wheel staying steady, and that makes it easier for you to drive. You know, when you got that good suspension, that good steering, when you let go of the wheel, you be driving down the street like, hey, how you doing? Because you let go, because your suspension is that good, the wheel does not move. Now, in an older car, you can't do that. Try to do that in a 86 Buick or something like that. That joint going to be like, veering to the side. Because misaligned tires, they create driving irritations like veering to one side or the other. That's how you know that your alignment is off. That's a key sign of misalignment. And that type of improper tire alignment, that can lead to a variety of expensive problems. And cars can be misaligned in any number of ways. For instance, you hit a curb, you drive over a pothole. You hit something in the road like a rock or whatever. Your tires can be knocked out of alignment. You can get in a minor accident with another vehicle. Your tires can be locked, your suspension can be knocked out of alignment. And your car starts sending you warning signals to let you know when it's misaligned. So by now, y'all like, dude, what is this, Top Gear? Pimp My Ride? I didn't come here to watch a show about cars, okay? But friends, my point is this. Too many churches are presenting ministries and on platforms, promoting platforms, which are misaligned. And when your ministries are not misaligned properly, or misaligned, the overall, just like a car, the overall performance of the ministry suffers. Properly aligned ministries make the entire undertaking, or, quote, the drive, feel smooth. If all the ministries are flowing the right way, you're rolling. Hey, how you doing? It's a smooth drive, okay? But misaligned ministries can be problematic, especially when they're being steered off course. Remember we said misalignment, your car start veering to one side or another. That's how your ministry does when it's steered wrong, when the leadership is wrong in it, steering it the wrong way, when the sensibilities are wrong. And just like the warning signs that we said existed when your tires are misaligned, the church would be wise, y'all, to heed the warning signs that show when the church's ministry is becoming misaligned. We're going to take a look at a few of them, okay? A misaligned ministry thinks that what matters most is the offering plate. And whether the website looks good and is fancy enough, it's up to snuff, the technology is good enough. Or whether the musicians sound concert level and the sermon is a feel-good message that's going to make everybody walk out going, oh, that was a great message. Not necessarily feeling convicted. A misaligned ministry thinks that the purpose of worship is to keep people satisfied. So it goes about singing the same songs that they always sing, praying the same old prayers that they always offer, and preaching the same old bland messages that they've been promoting for years. A misaligned ministry places value upon itself based on whether it can increase the number of, for instance, children in the youth ministry. Thinking that if they just pander to these kids' worldly sensibilities a little bit more, maybe they would attract more kids. So instead of us sticking to a standard and allowing the kids to meet that standard, we want kids so bad that we're going to lower our standards just to bring them in. That's by a false pretense. It's a misaligned ministry. A misaligned ministry places human concern over godly mandates, where the church is more worried that it's going to hurt somebody's feelings than it is about obeying God. A misaligned ministry campaigns for likes on the church Facebook page more than it campaigns for people to volunteer to come out and help do stuff. A misaligned ministry has a church of thousands upon thousands of people, and the same 10, 15 people always show up to the volunteer efforts. A misaligned ministry has too much capitalism and not enough social justice. They're all about money, not about the people. A misaligned ministry promotes too many country club sensibilities and not enough global church body sensibilities, meaning the people in it start clicking up and acting like they're in high school. Oh, we don't like them. We don't rock with that family. This is church, not high school, okay? It's like I'm in Archie Comics somewhere. If you don't know what Archie Comics are, go look that up. Those are classic, okay? Archie Comics, Jughead, Reggie, Betty and Veronica. Don't get me started. But that sensibility, a high school sensibility, should not exist in a church. It does in a misaligned ministry. A misaligned ministry, instead of promoting that global church body fellowship we just talked about, all churches should have, it instead acts as if the church down the street is competition in a battle to get people, in competition with them to get a battle to get people to show up. Like they're competing against the church down the street. Well, they had 20,000 at their service last month. We're going to have to try to match those numbers. That's a misaligned ministry. And perhaps most damaging, y'all, a misaligned ministry has a scope of focus that doesn't extend outward enough, like toward the poor and the hungry and the underserved in the community. Like, how's the church you're going to be cool with maintaining all your institutional traditions and debating over, how much this is going to go, how much of the budget is going to go toward this or that little trivial everyday matter when this little kid's starving and going without. And your church has a big budget dedicated to this little thing over here. Y'all know what that's like? Y'all know what that's equivalent to? That's equivalent from a church standpoint of knowing these things are going on, but they're more worried about internal stuff. That's equivalent to seeing your neighbor's house on fire and you just watching it while you sweeping the porch. Dang, that's a pretty hot fire. It's a pretty bright fire. You ain't gonna call 911, yo? You're not gonna get involved at all? That's like you about to drive off the edge of a steep cliff that like drops down thousands of feet. You know, like the end of Thumb and Louise. Well, we never actually saw them drive off the cliff, but a cliff like that to where you know, okay, after we go off the cliff, life's pretty much over because we're not going to survive this. That's like driving off that, and as you're inching toward the edge, you're more worried about changing the radio station. No, I don't like that song. You're more worried about that than you about the fact that you're about to go off the cliff. That's what that's like. Churches should not be promoting ideologies which endorse their own sanctified natures when people are suffering and going without. Don't nobody want to hear about how well your church is doing and how blessed your church is when people are suffering. Christ didn't form the church so that we could be in a position where all of a sudden, there's this competing ideology, and there's this thing about, well, my church is doing this, and my church is, we're all one global church body. We shouldn't be doing that. Do y'all know, because we're talking in the context of Amos. Remember, Amos was a prophet during a time when the rich was getting richer and the poor was getting poorer. We'll get to all that. But that's the context here. People was hungry, and the wealthy didn't care. Do y'all know that statistics indicate that the average American today eats 4 times as much as the average citizen of the world? That's overindulgence. 12.5% of the world's population, or roughly 900 million people, are undernourished. People are counting calories while other people are going hungry. It's just a fact of life. 25,000 people will starve today from hunger-related diseases. And 16,000 of those are children. You know a child dies every 5 seconds from malnutrition? But somehow, not only is that not news or people don't really care, it's not a priority for many churches either. I mean, in this country, people get devastated when there's a school shooting. We want to pray for this school. We want to do that. And why don't we do that same thing for poor and hungry children? What could be more violent than starvation? Lord have mercy. For a while, the early church believed that wealth was a sin against people who are starving. They believed that. But whenever they preached that message, they found out that doing so tended to keep the wealthy people from joining the church. What am I joining your church for? Every time I come up in there, you talk about how wicked I am because I got money. I'm not joining your church. So they were like, well, dang, that's kind of true. So we really shouldn't say that anymore. And therefore, churches stopped considering wealth a sin, and that persists to this day. In other words, the economic preferences of a materialistic society instead of Jesus, that's what shapes the church's theology these days. Money, not Christ. That's backwards. That's a misaligned ministry. See, what people don't want to admit is that what they have has anything to do with what other people don't have. People don't want to talk about that. They just want to keep on buying things that they don't really need. And they don't want to have to imagine, for instance, having to explain to a hungry child's face why they don't have to share what they don't have, what they have, or why they don't care if that kid goes hungry. They don't know what that's, they don't never have to experience that, and they don't want to have to experience that because it makes you really look in the mirror and see some things about life that are very harsh that make you have to want to deal with it from a ministerial standpoint. And this is where the prophet Amos enters the picture in our text and where the essence of our subject comes into play today. Because it's clear. The same sins that God was accusing the Israelites of committing, which led him to reject their worship, as he said in the text of chapter 5, are the same sins that we see going on everywhere today, including inside the church. And through Amos, God expressed his anger at religious folks who don't care about poor and starving people. All they care about is their traditions. Because that's what churches are full of now. Religious folks, not followers of Christ. There's a huge difference. Religious folk follow tradition and follow custom and say, we've always done it this way, so this is the way we're going to do it. It doesn't matter if the time changed. We're going to do it this way. My grandma did it this way in her church, and my mama's church did it this way, and we're going to do it this way too. And those are senior saints that have those sensibilities. Those are religious folk. When you follow Christ, you don't really get caught up in that. And during the time of the prophet Amos, before Christ, even he saw the social gap that was widening, with the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. Ain't that the same thing we see today? The wealthy overindulging in everything. That's what he saw. Isn't that what we see today? They were eating too much. They was drinking too much. They was buying too much stuff. Ain't that what we see today? Meanwhile, the poor people were struggling just to eat that day. Ain't that what we see today? And Amos saw that growing gap between the haves and the have-nots. And from our perspective, since it still applies today, we can actually imagine Amos's perspective as God is revealing all of this to him. Because remember, this isn't Amos saying this stuff. He walks in and says, God rejects he despises your rituals. He hates your feasts. He's sick of y'all singing. He wasn't saying that on his own. God gave this to him to say. And so from our perspective, it pretty much sounds like this. This is what God said to him when you read this text. He's like, yo, go shout it out in the streets. Tell them I'm coming. And they're going to have to pay for the neglect and rejection of my people. Tell them I can't stand their religion. He's talking about them back then. He's talking to us today. Remember, he's talking to us now. Modern perspective. He's like, tell them I can't stand their religious meetings. Tell them I've had it up to here with their little church conferences and their little conventions and their little committees that meet and conspire. Tell them I'm not interested in their little church projects and their little church budget plans or their little church fundraising schemes. Tell them I'm sick of their empty, hollow singing, where they act like it's more of a concert for entertainment purposes than a worship session for fellowship with me purposes. Tell them I'm tired of them acting like religious folks who choose to devote their attention to all these little trivial stuff, who get caught up in church politics, who are only interested in keeping their traditions going. Tell them it's going to get ugly. For all those so-called blessed and highly favored folks who think that justice is keeping what they have safe and separate from the people who need it most in the world. He's like, tell them it's going to get ugly for them. Y'all, that's the gist of the book of Amos. And the very same things, again, that God accused the people of back then. We just said them. The very same misalignment that they were in back then. We see it happening in the world right now. Remember, he was talking to people who went to the temple to worship him. In the same way it applies to people that go to church and worship him now. Not a lot has changed. To quote the great poet laureate's BBD, ain't nothing changed. Ain't nothing changed. I didn't sing it this time because, I could have. But if the church today was smart, we would learn from the example of these early Israelites. Because we surely don't want the same level of punishment that God gave them, now do we? Remember, he told them, because of what y'all done did it, because y'all was rich and neglected the poor, because y'all rejected me and gave me half-hearted worship, not only will I turn away from y'all, I'm going to send y'all into exile. I'm going to send a great power, which ended up being Assyria. I'm going to send a great power to come and conquer y'all and send y'all into exile. Y'all not even going to be, all this happiness y'all have in your land is going to be gone. You're going to be taken away from this land. You're going to go from being greedy with what you have to having nothing, including no country. That was a heck of a punishment. We don't want that level of punishment, because who knows if it's going to be on the level of taking away your country. It could be something different, something far worse. We don't know. But I don't know about you. I'm not trying to find out, okay? And that is the goodness of God. Even after all of his rebuke of the people and y'all getting on my nerves, he still gave Amos a vision of hope for the future. And that's where verse 24 comes in. Because I know y'all like, well, dang, when are we going to get to the verse that was the subject of our conversation today? Here we are. Verse 24 is God's vision to Amos that includes justice for the poor and the underserved. And through the prophet, God was telling the Israelites that they could still turn from their wicked ways and see good. We've all the way up to this point said that God might as well have been talking to us the same way. This applies too. There's still a chance for us as a church to realign our ministries, to get away from these sensibilities that show misalignment and get back in line with the system that God initially instituted for the church. Remember, we said misalignment is when it's off of the system, when it's the system that's off. The system's off, y'all. The church system is off right now. We can't have these things that we just described going on in the church and expect that to be a fruitful, blessed church by the Lord. Not when it's going according in the opposite direction of his mandates. We can't have that. God was saying to them the same way he's saying to us now. He would be gracious to them if they stopped focusing on themselves and instead started loving on the hurting people outside of the sanctuary, outside of their temples. We start loving more on the people outside the church, more than we do on the cliques and all the stuff that we got going on inside the church. God will be pleased with that, and he'll be gracious to us. He said if they did that, then he would accept their offerings and hear their songs. Remember what he said? I despise your feasts. I reject your rituals. I won't hear your songs when you sing them. Is he saying that to us now? The churches are closed right now. Think about this. This type of worship going on every Sunday, God gets so upset with it. He does something, who knows? Virus, I don't know, I'm just saying. He does something that causes all the churches to close. Now all the grandioseness and all the self-sufficiency and all the self-esteem you put into your building and your sanctuary, it's gone. You can't go there anymore. Now what are you going to do? This is God talking. Now what are you going to do? You can't go to the building that you love so much to worship me in and ooh, hallelujah in the concert setting and all that. You can't do that no more. Now what you going to do? I'm just saying. He said to them, I despise it, but if y'all turn, I'll show my love again. Saying to God, maybe we need to get back to that same sensibility. God will help the modern church find its way back to goodness, but we got to do our part. And God tells Amos that that kind of justice and fairness would flow like streams of water, and that righteousness would flow like an ever-flowing stream. Oceans of fairness and raging rivers of justice. I love those water metaphors. In other words, God challenges the church to properly realign itself and its ministries with his original vision of justice and compassion toward all people. Because that's all Jesus was about. And that's what the church was supposed to be about. And that's what God wants us to do, is realign the church to that. Churches have to stop operating and functioning as if they were a monolith. I'm an island and I stand alone. Too often, some churches have ministries that operate outside of the purview of the community, and they get stuck on themselves and their ways, and they only look internally instead of looking externally. And many churches adopt and cling to this sensibility so strongly that they even go so far as to refuse to work with other churches. Again, we said it before. They look at it as competition, a message to all pastors everywhere. Remember, we're all one global body. Stop running the church like it's your personal business. It's not. You're a steward of God's house. It's not your business. We need to keep that in mind. The church don't need any more ministers who want to maintain the church. It needs ministers who want to expand and extend the church. Get away from those antiquated sensibilities. Church doesn't need more temple administrators. It doesn't need more Pharisees and Sadducees. It needs more Pauls and Barnabases and John the Baptists, evangelists and church planners. The church has enough people, quote, keeping the rules. Now we need some exceptions to the rules, because these are exceptional times. It's going to call for exceptional measures. The minister's job is to be an instrument by which God fills the sanctuary with joy and revolution. And the church should be the place where everybody is committed to the idea that we do make a difference, that love makes a difference, that hope can be reawakened in the body of Christ, that evilness and hatred can be overcome by living like Christ and by sharing what we have with others. The church needs to represent that to the rest of the world. If we don't, no one will. Our ministries need to be big enough to include people who need the most of our help, and we can make a life-saving difference all over the world, y'all. The global church body. We can show our churches what it means to be loving, joyful, and Christ-like. We can show the world what Christ's church really consists of if we realign our ministries. We start doing this by engaging in little things like sharing with those who live in remote communities that don't have little or any access to clean water and electricity. We can do this by giving financial gifts that will serve the poor and underserved, and that'll give them better education and health care, and even improved agricultural conditions that'll help them. $20, they'll eat off of that for months. We can go beyond the routine of what the church has been doing and start being the ministers that God calls us to be.